Imagine you're a Russian central banker. It's Monday morning, February 28th, 2022. You open your Bloomberg terminal, and the numbers don't make sense. The reserves, $300 billion of them, they're gone, frozen. Not by bombs, not by soldiers, but by a keystroke. Visa and MasterCard credit cards stopped working. Airlines, they've lost their insurance coverage. And the ruble, it collapses. Moscow isn't under military siege, it's under financial quarantine. That morning, Russia learned what every nation eventually does. In the modern era, war isn't just fought on the battlefield. It's fought through the balance sheet. And America's most powerful weapon, it isn't its military, it's the dollar. This is the story of how cash became control, how sanctions, banking networks, and digital code became the tools of modern statecraft. Because in the 21st century, you don't need to conquer a country to control it. You just need to cut off its money supply. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome to Midweek Sitrep, your bi-weekly briefing on national security and the forces that shape it. My name is Jerry Fowler, and I'm your host. Every other week, I give you the context you need to see what's really going on so you can stay mission-focused. Today, we're talking about something that shapes every trade, every transaction, every war. Money as a weapon. How the dollar became America's strongest form of soft power. How sanctions became the new artillery of statecraft. And how finance, from banks to Bitcoin, became the front line of modern control. Let's get into it. The US dollar isn't just a currency. It's the operating system of the global economy. Almost 90% of foreign exchange trades involve it. Every major commodity, oil, copper, wheat, gas, is priced in it. And when nations store their reserves, more than half of that value sits in the US treasuries. That gives the dollar something no other currency has: ubiquity, backed by enforcement. Here's how it works. When a German company buys oil from Saudi Arabia, that payment, even if neither party is American, still clears through a U.S. correspondent bank somewhere along the way. That single point of contact gives the U.S. jurisdiction. That's not a bug of the system. That is the system. This architecture was built after World War II through Bretton Woods, when the U.S. designed the post-war financial order, one where the dollar was convertible to gold, and every other currency was pegged to it. When Nixon ended the gold standard in 1971, the dollar should have collapsed. It didn't. Because oil-producing states agreed to sell energy only in dollars. The petrodollar replaced gold as the foundation of trust. And over the decades, the dollar stopped being just a unit of value. It became the wiring behind the world's financial system. Every bank that settles trades, every insurer that prices risk, every shipper that pays freight fees, they rely on clearinghouses in New York. A wire transfer from Jakarta to Johannesburg might never touch American soil, but it still passes through a U.S. bank in microseconds. That's why the dollar isn't just money, it's infrastructure. And infrastructure creates leverage. If you control the rails that money travels on, you don't need to occupy territory. You can choke or channel the flow of global commerce with a phone call. The dollar stopped being backed by gold the day Nixon closed the window. Since then, it's been backed by access. Access to markets, to liquidity, to the system itself. That's what makes the US financial power different from military power. Armies can seize land. The dollar can seize motion. It can decide who participates in the global economy and who waits outside the gate. The modern sanction is a missile made of metadata. It doesn't explode. It excludes. When OFAC, the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, designates a person, a company, or a vessel, that name becomes radioactive. Banks worldwide scramble to purge accounts. Insurance firms void policies. Shipping lines deny cargo. The isolation is instant and total. OFAC doesn't need armies. It has acronyms. The SDN list, Specially Designated Nationals, and Entity lists, Sectoral Directives, Executive Orders. Each one quietly shifts the flow of the global money. When the US sanctioned Iran's central bank, oil exports plunged by 90%. When North Korea tested missiles, Treasury tracked the funding back to front companies in Singapore and China and sanctioned those too. That's how the US enforces rules beyond its borders. Not through conquest, but through connectivity. In the age of interdependence, exclusion is the ultimate weapon. But sanctions are more than punishment. They're communication. They tell the world which behaviors are beyond negotiation. Nuclear proliferation, terrorism, aggression, genocide. Every new sanction reaffirms values, but also reminds the world who sets the rules. And the more Washington uses this power, the more others study how to live without it. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, it expected the usual cycle: sanctions, speeches, diplomacy, but not a financial collapse. Within 72 hours, the United States and its allies froze more than $300 billion in Russian central bank reserves. Money Moscow had spent decades saving. Gone overnight. It wasn't seized, it was just inaccessible. Locked out of reach through the same financial networks that power global trade. That move stunned the world. It showed that the West could weaponize finance with precision, not just against companies or oligarchs, but against a nation-state's reserves. The effect was immediate. The ruble plunged. Banks faced liquidity crisis. Credit cards stopped working abroad. Foreign investors fled. Even ordinary citizens realized their currency, their savings, could be cut off from the global system in an instant. It was a new form of warfare, one waged not through force, but through exclusion. And for every government watching, especially those already at odds with the United States, the message was unmistakable. In the 21st century, financial access is sovereignty. Now, that realization didn't go unanswered. Long before the Ukrainian invasion, several emerging powers had been building a framework for cooperation, one that could balance or someday compete with the Western-led order. It's called BRICS, for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It was originally coined by a Goldman Sachs economist in 2001. BRICS began as an economic idea, a label for rising markets with global potential. By 2009, it became a political project, a series of summits designed to amplify their collective voice in a system dominated by the G7, the IMF, and the World Bank. But after 2022, that purpose evolved. The Russian sanctions confirmed what these nations already believed, that dependence on Western financial infrastructure carried strategic risk. So BRICS began talking less about reform and more about resilience, building institutions and payment systems that could function even if the West said no. Today, BRICS includes 5 core members, and it's expanded to include Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, Egypt, and Ethiopia. It now represents 40%, roughly, of the world's population and a quarter of the global GDP. Now, BRICS isn't united by ideology. The members range from democracies to dictatorships. But it is united by ambition to create a parallel network of trade, lending, and energy markets that reduces resilience on the dollar and Western regulation. That puts it in quiet competition with the West, not yet in strength, but in strategy. While the US and its allies use transparency, rule of law, and sanctions to shape behavior, BRICS members are experimenting with a softer standard and many less questions. For Washington, that's the emerging challenge. A world where the dollar still dominates, but not by default, and where financial power is no longer a given, but a contest. The freeze on Russia's reserves didn't create BRICS, but it clarified its purpose. And now, for the first time in decades, the West faces competition, not just in industry or defense, but in finance itself. Financial warfare always triggers adaptation. When one side builds controls, the other side builds workarounds. That's exactly what's happening now. As Western sanctions expanded, sanctioned states and their proxies created a shadow economy, a global network of front companies, cutouts, and covert channels designed to keep money and materials moving, despite the rules. And as sanctions tightened, adversaries adapted. North Korea operates through a global web of shell companies, fake shipping firms, middlemen in Singapore, digital aliases, to import oil and export items. Iran launders money through front businesses in Turkey, the UAE, and Malaysia. And since 2022, Russia has built what Western analysts call a shadow fleet. Hundreds of old oil tankers sailing under fake names and obscure flags, moving crude to China and India beyond the reach of Western insurance and tracking. These aren't criminals freelancing. They're state-backed evasion networks. And the US spends billions chasing them through ports, data trails, and compliance audits. That's the new tension. When money and code merge, enforcement becomes political. Because you're not just freezing accounts anymore, you're redefining what counts as freedom. Now, sanctions only work because companies enforce them. Banks, logistic firms, cloud providers, they are the foot soldiers of a financial warfare. When OFAC adds a name to the list, the Treasury Department doesn't seize the assets. Private banks do. That's the genius of the system, outsourced enforcement. But that also means risk flows downstream. Compliance officers have become battlefield commanders, deciding who gets paid and who gets cut off. Take British American Tobacco. In 2023, it paid over $600 million for selling cigarettes to North Korea through third parties. The company claimed ignorance. Treasury called it negligence. And for every British American Tobacco, there are a dozen firms quietly self-reporting, hoping to avoid the same fate. For global companies, this is the new calculus. Trade freely or access the dollar system, but not both. In the global economy, compliance isn't red tape, it's armor. Behind every export license, every flagged payment, every boardroom debate is the same question. Is this transaction worth the risk of being cut off from the financial bloodstream of the world? Because once you lose access, you don't just lose money, you lose participation in modern civilization. The next evolution of financial control isn't happening in banks, it's happening in code. Governments around the world are building central bank digital currencies, programmable, trackable, government-issued money. China's digital yuan is already live. Europe's digital euro is being tested. The US Federal Reserve, through Project Hamilton, is exploring what a digital dollar might mean. On the surface, central bank digital currencies look like progress. Instant payments, no intermediaries, reduction of fraud. But look deeper and they represent something else entirely: programmable power. Imagine money that can be only spent on certain goods, or that expires after 30 days to stimulate the economy. Imagine your funds geofenced to your city, or frozen during civil unrest. That's not dystopia, it's design. Now, this would allow governments to control not just the flow of money, but its function. They make financial statecraft precise, personal, and invisible. And that raises a new national security paradox. The same system that can stop a terrorist's wire transfer could also silence dissent. When money becomes code, control becomes absolute, and every transaction becomes policy. That's the next frontier. Can democracies wield this power responsibly, or will digital currency become the ultimate instrument of social control? Did you know that there's over 17,000 active U.S. sanctions today? More than triple the number from 2 decades ago. And each one is a policy decision and a stress test of American power. The risk isn't that sanctions stop working, it's that they start working too well. When nations fear exclusion, they don't reform, they redesign. China built CIPS, its own financial messaging system. Russia and Iran are building crypto-based trade corridors. Even U.S. allies in the Gulf are diversifying away from the dollar. If too many of those workarounds succeed, Washington's power to enforce global norms erode, not through war, but through withdrawal. Because the power of the dollar isn't in compulsion, it's in consent. It works because the world chooses to use it, and choice is fragile. The irony here? The same transparency and rule of law that make the U.S. system powerful are what can keep it legitimate. The world doesn't always agree with American policy, but it still prefers predictable rules to authoritarian opacity. That's America's strategic edge, if it can resist the temptation to weaponize trust. Every empire has had its medium of control. Rome had roads, Britain had ships, America has the dollar. But we're entering an age where money isn't printed, it's programmed. Where control isn't enforced by law, but by code. Financial warfare used to mean freezing assets. Now it means shaping behavior. For citizens, it means convenience comes with visibility. For companies, it means compliance is the new diplomacy. And for governments, it means every economic tool carries an ethical cost. Because in the end, money isn't neutral, it's power, distributed through systems we all depend on. And that's why everything is national security. And that's today's Sitrep. Make sure you keep up with Midweek Sitrep on Substack and YouTube for more on this and other topics. You'll find short clips, interviews, and bonus content. And if you want to support the show, check out our merch on everythingisnationalsecurity.com. Every shirt and hat helps keep us independent and growing. I'm Jerry Fowler, and remember, everything is national security. See you next time. Midweek Sitrep with Jerry Fowler is an independent production of Opcent Media Group, LLC. The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or professional advice. Listeners should consult with a qualified professional before making any decisions based upon the content discussed. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host, Jerry Fowler, and any guest, and do not reflect the official policy, position, or endorsement of any current or former employer, client, government agency, military organization, educational institution, or any other entity for which the host, Jerry Fowler, may be affiliated. Mention of a company, product, or service does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation. Any references are provided for informational purposes only. This podcast does not disclose any classified, proprietary, or confidential information. All discussions are based upon publicly available information and personal expertise.
Everything's national security. OpSent Media Group, LLC.